Most people don't realize it, but a large part of their life is built around one simple goal, and that is to feel comfortable. It doesn't sound like a problem at first because comfort feels safe, it feels stable, and it feels like you've reached a point where things are under control. You work hard to create a life where stress is manageable, where uncertainty is reduced, and where everything follows a predictable pattern. Over time, that predictability becomes something you depend on, something you protect, and something you begin to prioritize without even thinking about it. But hidden inside that comfort is a quiet cost that rarely gets noticed, and that cost is your growth. The reason this is so difficult to see is because comfort doesn't look like a problem from the outside. Your life might seem perfectly fine. You have a routine, you have an income, and you have a system that works well enough to keep things running. There's no immediate pressure forcing you to change anything, and because of that, everything feels acceptable. Not exciting, not deeply fulfilling, but acceptable. And that word becomes more important than people realize, because once something feels acceptable, it stops being questioned. You stop asking whether this is really what you want, and you start assuming that this is simply how things are supposed to be. If you look closely at how daily life is structured, you'll notice how quickly repetition turns into identity. You wake up at a certain time, follow the same habits, go to the same place, complete the same responsibilities, and return home to repeat the cycle again. At first, it feels efficient. You don't have to think too much because everything is already decided for you. But over time, that efficiency turns into limitation. The more predictable your life becomes, the less space there is for change, and the less likely you are to step outside of that pattern. You begin to operate on autopilot, and while that reduces stress, it also reduces awareness. What makes comfort even more powerful is how it slowly lowers your expectations without you realizing it. You don't suddenly decide to settle for less, it happens gradually. You adjust to your current situation, you normalize it, and you begin to build your life around maintaining it rather than improving it. Even if there's a part of you that feels like something is missing, it's never strong enough to create urgency. That feeling stays in the background, quiet and easy to ignore, while your routine continues exactly as it always has. This is where the trap begins to take shape, because when nothing feels wrong, there is no reason to change anything. Growth usually comes from some form of pressure, whether it's dissatisfaction, failure, or a strong desire for something more. But when your life is comfortable, that pressure disappears. You are not forced to think differently. You are not forced to act differently. And as a result, you remain in the same position for much longer than you realize. The system most people live in is perfectly designed to support this. It offers stability in exchange for consistency. You follow a structured path, you perform your role, and in return, you receive predictable rewards. As long as you stay within that structure, everything continues smoothly. There are no major disruptions, no unexpected risks, and no strong reasons to step outside of it. And because of that, it becomes very easy to believe that staying comfortable is the right decision. But smooth and meaningful are not the same thing, and this is where the difference starts to matter. A life that runs smoothly can still feel empty if it is not aligned with your potential. The problem is that comfort makes it harder to recognize that gap. It keeps things just stable enough that you don't feel the need to question it deeply. You continue moving forward, but without any real change in direction. Over time, this creates a subtle shift in how you see yourself. You begin to associate your identity with your routine. Your job becomes a definition of who you are, your habits become fixed, and your current level of progress starts to feel permanent. It's not that you consciously decide to limit yourself, but the longer you stay in the same environment, the more natural those limits begin to feel. What once seemed temporary slowly starts to feel like your reality. This is why stepping out of comfort feels so difficult, even when you know there might be something more for you. It's not just about changing what you do, it's about challenging what you've become used to. It's about letting go of the certainty that your current routine provides and stepping into something that doesn't offer the same level of predictability. And that uncertainty is what most people try to avoid. Discomfort is often misunderstood because it feels like something negative, something that should be minimized or avoided whenever possible. But in reality, discomfort is closely connected to growth. It appears when you are doing something unfamiliar, something that pushes your limits, something that requires you to adapt. It is not always pleasant, but it is often necessary. The problem is that if you have spent too much time prioritizing comfort, discomfort begins to feel like a threat instead of an opportunity. When that happens, your decisions start to change. You begin to choose what is easy over what is meaningful. You delay actions that feel uncertain. You wait for the right time, for more confidence, for better conditions, and in the process, you remain exactly where you are. It's not because you lack ability, but because the cost of leaving comfort feels higher than the cost of staying in it.
The longer this continues, the stronger the pattern becomes. Your brain starts to associate comfort with safety and discomfort with risk, even when that is not entirely true. You begin to build a life that is optimized for ease rather than growth, and while that might feel good in the short term, it creates limitations in the long term. Opportunities that require effort, risk, or uncertainty become less appealing, and as a result, they are often ignored. This is why real progress rarely happens in comfortable conditions. It happens when something pushes you beyond what you were used to, when you are forced to think differently, when you have to deal with situations that don't have clear outcomes. Those moments are not always enjoyable, but they are the ones that create change. They are the ones that expand your perspective and increase your capacity. Understanding this is where the shift begins. Because once you recognize that comfort can limit you, you start to question it differently. Instead of automatically choosing what feels easy, you begin to ask whether it is actually moving you forward. Instead of avoiding discomfort, you begin to evaluate it. You start to see it as a signal, something that might indicate growth rather than danger. This doesn't mean you need to completely remove comfort from your life. It means you need to stop relying on it as your default. It means being intentional about when you choose ease and when you choose challenge. It means recognizing that both have a place, but they serve different purposes. Comfort can help you recover, but it cannot help you grow. Once that perspective starts to settle in, your behavior begins to change in small but important ways. You start taking actions that you might have avoided before. You explore ideas that once felt uncertain. You allow yourself to move forward without having everything perfectly planned. These changes might seem small at first, but over time they begin to shift your entire direction. What's interesting is that as you spend more time outside of comfort, your tolerance for discomfort increases. Things that once felt difficult start to feel manageable. Situations that once caused hesitation begin to feel normal. And gradually, your definition of comfort itself begins to change. It is no longer tied to staying in the same place, but to your ability to handle change.
At that point, you are no longer controlled by comfort. You are using it. You are choosing when to step into it and when to step out of it based on what your situation requires. That flexibility is what creates real freedom, not the absence of discomfort, but the ability to move through it without being held back by it. And that's where the real transformation happens, because your life is no longer built around avoiding risk or maintaining stability at all costs. It becomes built around growth, around progress, around moving towards something that actually matters to you. You are no longer stuck in a pattern that simply repeats itself. You are actively shaping your direction. In the end, the trap was never comfort itself, but the way it was used. When comfort becomes your goal, it limits your potential. But when it becomes something you manage instead of something you chase, it loses its control over you. And that changes everything, because now your decisions are no longer based on what feels easiest, but on what actually moves you forward. And once you reach that point, it becomes very clear that the real danger was never failure or uncertainty, but the quiet decision to stay exactly where you are simply because it feels comfortable enough.